A simple deal, made to protect a 10-year-old, turns into the storm of a lifetime. The widow is told the clock is running out. Then a shocking call hints it might be wrong. Cameras swarm. A fixer leaks a cruel lie. A small fire sparks bigger rumors. And the billionaire? He's hiding a fragile heartbeat the world must never see. They try to do one brave thing: feed their town, shelter veterans, keep a child safe. But every kindness makes the headlines meaner. A forged email, a boardroom threat, and a surprise visit from child services push them to the edge. When the town gathers and the truth finally flickers to life, one promise could either heal a community or break 3 hearts. If a marriage starts as mercy, can it survive the lies, the fear, and the secret that could stop a heartbeat before love has a chance to begin? The night stretched endlessly as Elena lay in her bed, staring at the shadows on her ceiling. The soft glow of her phone screen lit up the darkness every few minutes as she checked for a response. Each time, her heart jumped, only to sink again at the empty inbox. Down the hall, she could hear Rosie's gentle breathing through the thin walls of their duplex. The sound both comforted and squeezed at her heart. She rolled onto her side, hugging her pillow close as her mind raced through the events of the day. The word advanced echoed in her thoughts like a cruel whisper. She could still feel the cold metal of the ultrasound wand, still see Dr. Shah's careful expression as she promised more detailed results soon. The memory of nearly falling while frosting those cinnamon rolls made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Get it together, Elena," she whispered to herself, running her fingers through her tangled hair. Her hand brushed against the damp spot on her pillowcase, where tears had leaked out without her notice. The wall clock ticked past midnight. Elena got up, her bare feet silent on the worn carpet, and walked to the kitchen. The linoleum was cool under her feet as she filled a glass with tap water. Rosie's school photo smiled at her from the fridge, held up by a lighthouse magnet from their last beach trip. "What would you think of me, sweetheart?" she murmured to the photo. "Asking a stranger to marry your mom?" But Gabe wasn't exactly a stranger, was he? The memory of that summer day flooded back again. The panic in his young eyes as the current pulled him under, the weight of his body as she dragged him to shore, the way his hands had gripped her arms as he coughed up seawater. Her phone buzzed on the counter, making her jump. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, but it was just a weather alert. Elena let out a shaky laugh at her own nervousness. Back in bed, she pulled up her sent email and reread it for the 100th time, analyzing every word. "Dear Mr. Whitlock, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Elena Hart. 23 years ago, I was a volunteer EMT at Harbor Point Beach when I pulled you from a rip current. I've never forgotten that day, and I find myself needing to speak with you about a personal matter concerning my child's future and that debt of life I once paid. Would you be willing to meet? Sincerely, Elena Hart." The words were simple, honest, maybe too simple. But anything more felt like manipulation, and Elena couldn't bear that. She'd rather be rejected for the truth than accepted for a lie. She checked the time again, 12:47 a.m. The overdue rent notice on her desk seemed to glow in the dark, a reminder of just how quickly things could fall apart. Her savings account held less than 2 months' worth of expenses. The medical bills hadn't even started coming in yet. Elena closed her eyes and tried to pray again, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself humming the lullaby she always sang to Rosie, the one about lighthouse beams guiding ships home through storms. A soft creak in the hallway made her eyes snap open. Rosie stood in the doorway, her lighthouse snow globe clutched to her chest. "Can't sleep, baby?" Elena lifted her blanket in invitation. Rosie padded over and climbed in, careful not to shake her snow globe too hard. "The lighthouse wanted to check on you," she said seriously. Elena smiled, wrapping her arm around her daughter. "Did it now?" "Mm-hmm." Rosie settled against her side. "It knows when people need extra light." Elena's throat tightened. She pressed a kiss to Rosie's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You're my light, you know that? And you're my safe harbor," Rosie mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. Elena held her daughter close, listening to her breathing even out. The snow globe sat on the bedside table, its tiny lighthouse a sentinel in the darkness. She thought about harbors and safe places, about the difference between drowning and treading water, about the kind of courage it takes to ask for help. Her phone screen lit up again, 1:15 a.m. Still no response. Elena tried to quiet her mind, to focus on Rosie's warmth beside her, to find comfort in the moment rather than fear of the future. But her thoughts kept circling back to the email, to Gabe Whitlock, to the desperate hope that somewhere in this world was someone who would understand what she was really asking, not for herself, but for the sleeping child beside her. The night crept forward, marked by the steady ticking of the clock and the soft whisper of Rosie's breathing. Elena lay awake, watching over her daughter's dreams, waiting for morning to come with its answers or its silence. Elena's phone buzzed at exactly 7:05 in the morning, jolting her from a restless doze. Her heart hammered as she read the message. "Mr. Whitlock will meet you today. 4 p.m. Lighthouse Cafe." The message was crisp, professional. No emotion, just facts. Elena's hands shook as she got Rosie ready for school, trying to keep her morning routine perfectly normal. "Mom, you're humming," Rosie observed as she spread peanut butter on her toast. "You only hum when you're nervous." Elena forced her hands to steady as she packed Rosie's lunch. "Just some grown-up errands today, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about the doctor?" Rosie's eyes, so much like her father's, studied Elena's face. "No, baby. Different errands." Elena kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Have a good day at school. I love you." After dropping Rosie off, Elena walked the familiar streets of Harbor Point, rehearsing what she would say. The words tumbled through her mind. "Mr. Whitlock, I know this is unusual. No, too formal. Gabe, I remember that day at the beach. No, too personal. Nothing seemed right. The hours crawled by. Elena tried to work at the bakery, but her boss sent her home after she nearly burned a batch of cookies. Get some rest," he'd said kindly. "You look pale." At 3:45, Elena sat in the Lighthouse Cafe, a cup of untouched tea growing cold before her. The cafe was quiet, just a few regulars scattered among the weathered wooden tables. The wall-length windows faced the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed gently in the afternoon sun. At exactly 4 o'clock, a man in a navy baseball cap and simple grey jacket walked in. If Elena hadn't been looking for him, she might have missed him entirely. Nothing about Gabe Whitlock suggested billionaire, except perhaps the quiet confidence in his movements and the way his eyes took in everything at once. He spotted her immediately and walked over, removing his cap as he sat down. "Elena Hart," he said softly. "You look exactly the same." Elena managed a small smile. "You've changed a bit since you were 16. That tends to happen in 23 years. His voice was gentle, with traces of his Maine upbringing still evident. "Your message was intriguing. You mentioned your child?" "My daughter, Rosie. She's 10. Elena pulled out her phone, showing him a recent photo of Rosie at the beach, her smile bright against the sea. "She has your smile," Gabe observed. He waited, patient, clearly used to letting others speak first. Elena took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitlock, Gabe, please." "Gabe, what I'm about to ask will sound crazy. I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. She gripped her teacup tighter. Yesterday, I received some preliminary medical news. They found a mass. Ovarian cancer, they think. Advanced. Gabe's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. I'm very sorry to hear that. I have no family left. Rosie's father died in the Navy 3 years ago. If something happens to me... Her voice cracked. The foster system would take her. She's already lost so much. I can't let her lose everything else, her home, her school, her friends. Understanding began to dawn in Gabe's eyes. Elena pressed on before her courage failed. I know about your foundation's work with children in foster care. I've followed your career, your commitment to helping others. That day on the beach, when I pulled you from that rip current, I've thought about it often. How one moment can change everything. What exactly are you asking, Elena? She met his gaze directly. I'm asking you to marry me. A legal, transparent arrangement focused solely on Rosie's guardianship and stability. We'd have a prenup drawn up protecting you and your assets. You'd become Rosie's legal guardian if... She swallowed hard. When something happens to me. Silence fell between them. Outside, seagulls wheeled past the windows, their cries muted by the glass. You've thought this through, Gabe said finally. I've thought of nothing else since yesterday. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me about Rosie, her routines, her schooling. Is she religious? We attend Harbor Point Community Church, but we're not strict about it. She's in 5th grade at Marina Elementary. Straight A's, loves science and art. She has this snow globe collection, lighthouses mostly. When she's nervous, she shakes one and counts the glitter until she feels brave again. Gabe nodded, absorbing each detail. And you? What would you want from this arrangement? Just time with my daughter, and the peace of knowing she'll be safe and cared for when I'm gone. No demands for financial support now. No, I can support us as long as I'm able to work. Gabe was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. I need time to think about this, and to consult with my legal team. He checked his watch. I can have an answer for you by noon tomorrow. Is that acceptable? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. I remember that day, Elena. I remember thinking I was going to die, and I remember the strength in your hands when you pulled me out. He stood up, putting his cap back on. I'll call you tomorrow. Elena watched him leave, then sat there until her tea was completely cold. Finally, she walked home on shaky legs and made Rosie her favorite dinner, grilled cheese with tomato soup. That night, after Rosie was asleep, Elena lay in bed watching the numbers on her clock tick past. 11 o'clock, 11:30, midnight. The next morning crawled by in a haze. Elena jumped at every sound, every vibration of her phone. At 11:38, just as she was measuring flour at the bakery, her phone began to ring. Elena's hands trembled uncontrollably as she answered the phone, her breath catching in her throat. Hello? Elena. Gabe's voice was clear and steady, a calm counterpoint to her racing heart. I've made my decision. Yes, if it protects Rosie. She gripped the kitchen counter with white knuckles, her knees suddenly so weak she feared they might buckle beneath her. Thank you, she whispered, the words barely audible. I have conditions. He continued, his tone businesslike yet gentle. First, no romantic expectations. This is strictly a partnership focused on Rosie's future and well-being. Second, we need an ironclad guardianship. Clause that activates immediately if necessary. Third, we'll frame this publicly as a philanthropy partnership through my foundation. It will deflect unwanted attention and protect everyone's privacy. Yours especially. That makes perfect sense, Elena agreed, her heart hammering against her ribs as the reality of what they were planning washed over her. My legal team is already drafting the paperwork now. Can you meet at the courthouse at 4:30 today? The judge owes me a favor and will see us privately. Today. It was really happening. Not some distant plan, but mere hours away. Elena swallowed hard. Yes, I'll need someone to review the documents for me first, though. Of course, I'll have them sent to any lawyer you choose by noon. Your protection matters to me. Elena thought of the free legal clinic downtown where Navy spouses often sought help. I know where to go, and I'd like to ask Pastor Mara to witness. She runs the soup kitchen where I volunteer. She's discreet and kind. Perfect. Simple and quiet is best for something like this. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling in the background. Elena, about your living situation. I know you're behind on rent. The landlord called my office. I have a gated guest house on the edge of town, surrounded by gardens. It would be safer for you and Rosie to move there tonight. No more worrying about bills or security. Relief flooded through her body like a warm wave, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. Are you sure? That's so much to offer. Absolutely. We'll set clear ground rules, separate bedrooms, shared dinners when schedules allow, complete financial transparency so you never feel indebted. And your medical privacy will be respected. You share only what you choose to when you're ready. I won't pry. At the legal clinic later that morning, Elena sat with Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed attorney with gentle hands who reviewed every line of the prenup and guardianship agreement with meticulous care. This is remarkably solid, Sarah confirmed, tapping her pen against the final page. All your concerns are thoroughly addressed, and Rosie's interests are fully protected no matter what happens. Mr. Whitlock's team has been impressively thorough and fair. The courthouse was hushed and nearly empty when Elena arrived, her best navy dress smoothed nervously over her hips. Gabe waited in the hallway, wearing a dark suit that somehow made him look both powerful and somehow vulnerable at the same time. Pastor Mara stood beside him in her practical cardigan, her kind face serene and comforting. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. No music, no flowers, just quiet words and promises of mutual respect. Elena's hands were surprisingly steady as she signed the papers. Gabe's signature was precise and unhurried, his expression thoughtful. Coffee? Pastor Mara suggested afterward, breaking the solemn mood. You both look like you could use something warm. They walked together to the church kitchen, where the afternoon volunteers were preparing vegetables for the evening meal. Someone quietly started a prayer circle, not celebrating the marriage, but asking for courage and strength for the journey ahead. Elena left to pick up Rosie from school while Gabe arranged for professional movers. She sat her daughter down in their small, worn living room, perching together on the threadbare sofa that had seen better days. Honey, something big happened today, she began carefully, tucking a strand of Rosie's hair behind her ear. Mr. Whitlock and I got married. Not in a big fancy way, but in a helping each other way. Rosie's eyes went wide, her small mouth forming a perfect O. The computer guy who helps kids? The one who built the new playground? Yes, exactly. We did this to make our family safer and stronger. He's going to help us, and we're moving to his guest house tonight. It has a garden and is very close to your school. Rosie was quiet for a moment, her forehead wrinkled in thought. Then she reached for her favorite lighthouse snow globe, the one her father had given her before his last deployment. She shook it hard, watching the glitter swirl around the tiny beacon. Like a safe harbor? That's what Dad called places where you don't have to be afraid. Elena's throat tightened painfully, tears threatening again. Exactly like that, sweetheart. Exactly like that. The movers worked quickly and efficiently, careful with Rosie's treasures and Elena's few family heirlooms. By nightfall, they were settled in the guest house, a lovely 2-bedroom cottage with polished hardwood floors and a kitchen that made Elena's baker heart sing with its gleaming countertops and professional-grade oven. Rosie explored every corner while Elena unpacked the essentials, arranging familiar photos to make the space feel like home. Gabe arrived with takeout Chinese food at 8 o'clock, carrying brown paper bags that filled the cottage with enticing aromas. They sat at the kitchen table, passing containers of orange chicken, beef, and broccoli, and fried rice. Rosie chatted animatedly about school and her new bedroom, seemingly unfazed by the day's momentous changes. "I put the house rules on the fridge," Gabe said quietly after Rosie went to bed, her lighthouse snow globe carefully positioned on her new nightstand. "And Elena, thank you for trusting me with this. With your lives." She managed a tired but genuine smile. "Thank you for saying yes when you could have walked away." They both jumped slightly, the moment broken when Elena's phone buzzed loudly at 6:40 the next morning. The clinic's number flashed ominously on the screen, bringing her back to the harsh reality waiting beyond their new arrangement. Elena's hands shook uncontrollably as she answered the phone, her fingers barely able to press it against her ear. "Hello?" "Mrs. Hutt, this is Nancy from Dr. Shah's office." A warm, reassuring voice said through the receiver. "I'm calling about your scan results. The radiologist who read your images added an important note this morning that we thought you should know about right away." Elena sank heavily into a kitchen chair, her knees suddenly too weak to support her. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Yes?" she whispered, gripping the edge of the table with her free hand. "Some features of the mass suggest it could be benign or borderline. It has several characteristics that differ from typical malignancies. It might be very treatable with the right approach, but we need to do a biopsy to be absolutely certain of what we're dealing with. The earliest slot we have available is 10 days from now, on the 15th. Dr. Shah wanted you to have this information as soon as possible. 10 more days of uncertainty. 10 more days balanced on the knife edge between fear and possibility. But where there had been only darkness before, a tiny flame of hope now flickered. Elena released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible. "I'll take it. Please, I'll take that appointment." After hanging up, she sat motionless for several minutes, letting the news settle into her bones. Then she made her way down the hallway to find Gabe. He was in his home office, already dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and working at his computer. The morning sunlight slanted across his serious profile as he looked up when she knocked softly on the doorframe. "The radiologist added a note to my file," she said, then carefully explained everything Nancy had told her. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, putting words to this new, fragile possibility. "I know this changes things. The marriage, we made that decision based on certainty. And now there's hope." "We keep promises," Gabe interrupted quietly, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. "Let's wait for certainty before changing course. Meanwhile, we can focus on doing good work in town, establishing ourselves. It might help quiet the gossip that's bound to start once people realize we've married so suddenly." Elena nodded gratefully, touched by his steadiness. "I need to tell Rosie something. She's too perceptive. She'll know something's happening." "Of course. Would you like me to be there when you talk to her?" Gabe asked, already half rising from his chair. "No, but thank you for offering," Elena said gently. "This needs to be just us. Mother and daughter." She found Rosie in her bedroom, getting ready for school, carefully arranging her textbooks and folders in her backpack with methodical precision. "Sweetheart?" Elena sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. "I need to tell you something important. Mom has to have some more tests at the doctor's soon." Rosie's small hands stilled over her math notebook. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, widened. "Are you sick?" "They're not sure yet. That's why they need the tests, to figure out what's going on inside my body. But the most important thing is that we're together, okay? We have each other, and we have Gabe helping us now. We're not alone in this." Rosie abandoned her backpack and climbed into her mother's lap, something she hadn't done in months. She wrapped her thin arms around Elena's neck. "Promise you'll tell me if things get scary, even if you think I'm too little?" Elena hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. "I promise. No secrets between us about the big stuff. Now, let's get you to school before the bell rings." That evening, they sat at the kitchen table with calendars spread out before them like road maps to their new life together. Elena wrote down her bakery hours in flowing script, early mornings Tuesday through Saturday, starting at 6:30. Rosie's school schedule went next, marked in purple pen, along with her weekly library reading club that met every Thursday afternoon. "We should keep your volunteer work at the church kitchen," Gabe suggested thoughtfully, studying the calendar. "It matters to you both, and it's important to maintain the connections you've already built in the community." Elena smiled, touched by his consideration. "Wednesday and Friday evenings, from 4 until 7. You're welcome to join us, you know. Extra hands are always needed." "I'd like that," he said, making careful notes in his phone. "Other evenings, we can have dinner here together. Simple family meals at the table. It will help establish normalcy for all of us, especially Rosie." They settled into a tentative rhythm over the next 2 days, learning the contours of each other's lives. Saturday and Sunday passed quietly, almost peacefully. Elena baked at home, filling the guest house with the comforting smell of cinnamon and vanilla as she tested new recipes. Rosie sprawled with her homework at the kitchen counter, her pencil tapping against her cheek when she concentrated, while Gabe typed on his laptop nearby, occasionally looking up to ask Rosie about her assignment or offer Elena a quiet smile. They ate together at regular times, talked about small everyday things, and began learning how to be a kind of family, makeshift and unexpected, but real nonetheless. Sunday evening, Elena laid out her clothes for Monday's bakery shift with practiced care. Comfortable cushioned shoes for standing all day, her favorite apron with the delicately embroidered flowers along the pocket, a light sweater for the early morning chill. She set her alarm for 5:45, giving herself time to ease into the morning with a cup of tea before facing the day. She fell asleep thinking about the chocolate croissants she'd prepare tomorrow and the winter specialty drinks her customers loved, trying deliberately not to count the days until the biopsy that might change everything. Again. Her alarm blinked 6:15 Monday morning when everything changed. Elena's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her stomach dropped as she read the headline. "Billionaire scammed by small-town widow's cancer marriage." Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Anonymous sources claimed she'd fabricated her illness to trap Gabe into marriage. Photos showed their courthouse ceremony, her walking Rosie to school, even leaving Dr. Shah's office. The story painted her as a calculated gold digger. "Mom?" Rosie called from the kitchen. "There are big vans outside with cameras." Elena rushed to the window. 3 news vans clustered near the guest house gate, reporters already setting up equipment. Gab's phone rang. His face hardened as he answered. "Colin? Yes, I've seen it." Elena could hear the sharp voice of Colin Price, Gabe's COO, through the speaker. "The board's in panic. This looks terrible, Gabe. That housing project for veterans in New York? Donors are getting spooked. We need an immediate annulment to contain this." "No," Gabe said firmly. "Think about the optics. I said no, Colin." Gabe ended the call and turned to Elena. "I'm sorry. This shouldn't be happening." Elena's phone showed 15 missed calls from the hospital. When she finally got through, the scheduler sounded flustered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. Your biopsy date is under review due to security concerns. With all the media attention—" "Please," Elena whispered. "I need this test. We'll call you when we can reschedule." The morning grew worse. Rosie's teacher called at 10:30. "There are reporters at the school fence," she explained gently. "And some children are, well, they're repeating things their parents said about the news story." Elena's heart broke. "I'll come get her. Pastor Mara's already here," the teacher said. She offered to take Rosie to the church until things calmed down. "Thank God for Mara," Elena breathed. Gabe's PR team arrived by 11, laptops open, suggesting careful statements about misunderstandings and private matters. "No," Gabe said again. "We're not feeding this fire with carefully worded denials. Mr. Whitlock, with respect, what we are," he continued, "is exactly who we've always been. Elena works at the bakery. I run my company. We both volunteer at the church kitchen. We'll keep doing all of that." He turned to Elena. "We stand steady. We do good. Let them watch." Elena felt tears well up. "The church kitchen serves dinner tonight." "Then that's where we'll be." He smiled slightly. "Let's give them something real to photograph." Throughout the afternoon, more reporters gathered. Elena's phone filled with messages from old friends and strangers alike, some supportive, others cruel. She turned it off. At 4:30 they drove to the church, reporters following at a distance. Pastor Mara met them at the back door, Rosie helping her sort cans of vegetables. "I've had calls all day from our regulars," Mara said. "They're worried the cameras will keep people away from dinner." "We'll serve it anyway," Elena said, reaching for an apron. Gabe nodded. "Every single night." At 5 o'clock they stood ready in the kitchen, aprons tied, as Mara opened the doors. Through the window, Elena could see camera flashes, but inside there was only the familiar rhythm of ladles hitting bowls, the murmur of conversation, and the simple grace of serving others. Rosie moved between tables with water pitchers, chatting with the regulars who'd known her since she was small. Some patted her shoulder or slipped her pieces of hard candy. They were protecting her, Elena realized, creating a buffer of normalcy against the chaos outside. A young mother came in, clearly nervous about the cameras. Elena led her to a quiet corner table. "The soup is good tonight," she said softly, "and no one here will bother you." The woman's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you." Gabe worked steadily beside Elena, handling dishes, refilling coffee cups. His movements were precise and careful, like everything he did. But there was something new in his face, a quiet certainty that steadied her. When he passed behind her, he murmured, "We're okay." And somehow, stirring soup in a church basement while reporters clustered outside, Elena believed him. They would face tomorrow, and the biopsy, and whatever came after. But right now they were exactly where they needed to be, serving others, protecting Rosie, and choosing to stand steady in the storm. Pastor Mara caught her eye and nodded toward the window, where the first stars were appearing above the camera lights. "Grace shows up with dirty hands," she said, as she always did. "Even on the hard days." Elena tied on a fresh apron as more people came through the doors, drawn by the warmth and light of the kitchen. Whatever tomorrow brought, tonight they would serve soup, offer bread, and trust that doing good was its own answer to lies. The dinner line grew steadily, familiar faces mixing with new ones. Mr. Alvarez shuffled in, his Vietnam veteran cap worn with quiet pride, the faded green fabric bearing silent witness to memories he rarely shared. Elena recognized him from his daily visits to the bakery for coffee and a roll, always arriving precisely at 7:15 each morning, leaving exact change and a gentle nod. "Miss Elena," he said softly, his weathered face creasing into a smile that transformed his solemn features. "Good to see you here tonight. Means something, you being here." "It's good to see you too, Mr. Alvarez," Elena replied, ladling an extra generous portion into his bowl. He accepted the soup with careful hands, fingers slightly bent with arthritis but still steady. "Thank you for showing up. Some folks might have stayed home with all this." He gestured vaguely toward the windows, where camera flashes occasionally lit up the evening like artificial lightning, illuminating worried faces before plunging them back into shadow. More veterans filed in behind him, men and women Elena knew from the neighborhood, who'd always treated her and Rosie with gentle courtesy, offering small kindnesses after her husband's passing. There was Mrs. Daniels with her ever-present cane, Mr. Washington with his soft voice and booming laugh, and 3 younger vets who lived in the apartment complex 2 blocks over. They formed a sort of honor guard at the front tables, their presence creating a buffer between the serving line and the few reporters who'd ventured inside, their protective instincts clearly engaged. Gabe worked steadily at the bread station, his knife moving in precise, even strokes through the crusty loaves. His methodical approach reminded Elena of a surgeon, deliberate, focused, present in each motion. She noticed how he'd position himself to block photographers' views of guests who seemed uncomfortable with the attention, his broad shoulders becoming a living shield. His movements were efficient but unhurried, creating a sense of calm that spread through the kitchen like ripples across still water. Rosie wove between tables with her tray of water glasses, stopping to chat with regulars who'd known her since she was small. Her ponytail bounced with each careful step, her concentration visible in the tip of her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth. Mr. Martinez showed her a new card trick, his gnarled hands suddenly nimble as he made the Queen of Hearts disappear and reappear behind Rosie's ear, drawing a delighted giggle. Mrs. Chen from the laundromat slipped her a butterscotch candy wrapped in crinkly gold paper, whispering something that made Rosie beam. Each small interaction seemed to build a wall of normalcy around her daughter, a fortress of everyday kindness. A young woman with a camera moved through the room, but she wasn't like the aggressive paparazzi outside. Her movements were respectful, almost reverent. She focused her lens on steam rising from soup bowls, creating halos in the fluorescent light, on hands passing bread, young to old, smooth to calloused, on genuine smiles shared between servers and guests. Her presence felt more like documentation than intrusion, capturing moments of dignity rather than scandal. "Freelance blogger," Mr. Alvarez explained quietly when he came up for seconds, nodding toward the photographer as Elena refilled his bowl. "Local girl. Name's Maya. Does good work about community stuff. Real stories, not gossip. Her father was Army, like my son." The evening wound down slowly, conversations softening to murmurs as the crowd thinned. As the last guests finished their meals, Mr. Alvarez lingered, helping stack chairs and wipe tables with methodical care, refusing to leave anyone with extra work. "Let me walk you folks home," he offered, his eyes scanning the darkened windows with the vigilance of someone who'd learned caution in hard places. "I know some quiet ways. Streets I've walked for 40 years. They slipped out the kitchen's back door into the cooling evening, the metal door clicking softly behind them. Mr. Alvarez led them down narrow streets and alleyways with the confidence of someone mapping familiar territory, pointing out shortcuts Elena had never noticed in her years of walking these blocks, despite passing them hundreds of times. "See there?" He indicated a narrow passage behind the bakery, barely visible between stacked milk crates and recycling bins. "They like to wait there sometimes with their cameras, but old Tommy who runs the shoe repair shop, he keeps his back door propped open. Good shortcut through his store if you need it. Smells like leather and polish, but Tommy don't mind folks passing through when they need to." His tour included notes about which shopkeepers were friendly, which routes had the best lighting, where security cameras might offer additional safety. He pointed out hidden benches for resting, corners where wind cut less sharply, and which neighbors kept porch lights burning until dawn. "Got my own camera on the porch," he mentioned, tapping his temple. "Memory needs help these days, but it catches everything. Been watching out since your man shipped out. Old habits." Elena noticed Gabe's slightly labored breathing as they walked, the subtle tightening around his mouth. He'd grown pale, though he tried to hide it, his hand occasionally pressing against his chest in what he probably thought was an inconspicuous gesture. The evening chill seemed to be taking its toll. "Must have been a long day for all of us," she said casually, shifting positions so he could lean against a wall, while Mr. Alvarez pointed out another alternate route. "Why don't you tell me more about the shortcut through Palmer Street while we catch our breath? Rosie, come see this interesting brick pattern." Gabe gave her a grateful look, understanding her subtle intervention without wounded pride. Mr. Alvarez launched into a detailed description of the Palmer Street route, seemingly oblivious to their pause but positioning himself to block the view from the main road, his veteran's instincts for perimeter security still sharp. When they resumed walking, Elena quietly redistributed items she'd been carrying to Gabe's less physical side, giving him natural reasons to pause or sit. She took the heavier bag of leftover bread, passing him the lighter sack of napkins instead. He accepted the help without comment, but his eyes held appreciation and something deeper, recognition of being seen without being exposed. The next afternoon, after Rosie's school day ended with its usual flurry of backpacks and permission slips, they all felt the need to escape the confines of the guest house with its growing collection of curious eyes at windows. The harbor offered a perfect refuge, open enough to prevent ambush by photographers, but public enough to discourage their more aggressive tactics, with plenty of fishermen and dock workers who wouldn't tolerate disruption. The water lay calm and silver blue under the autumn sky, reflecting clouds that drifted like scattered cotton. Boats bobbed gently at their moorings, their rigging chiming softly in the breeze like distant wind chimes. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries somehow both mournful and comforting. Here, surrounded by the steady presence of the sea, the chaos of the outside world seemed to recede, washed away by the ancient rhythm of waves against weathered pilings. Rosie's eyes lit up as Gabe showed her the small outboard motor on the harbor dinghy. The late afternoon sun glinted off the water, casting dancing reflections on their faces. The harbor breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed, mingling with the distant aroma of fried fish from the wharf restaurant. "First rule of boating," Gabe explained, his voice patient and steady, "is safety." He helped Rosie into her life jacket, tugging and adjusting the bright orange vest with careful attention. His fingers worked methodically, checking each buckle twice. "Always check your gear before leaving the dock. That's what separates good sailors from the ones who need rescuing." Elena watched from her perch on the weathered planks, her shoulders gradually relaxing as she observed their easy interaction. The harbor's familiar sounds, creaking dock lines, calling seabirds, gentle slap of waves, wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, breathing deeply of the sea air that seemed to wash away the tension of recent days. "Now hold the tiller like this," Gabe demonstrated, guiding Rosie's small hands to the correct position. His large hands enveloped her tiny ones, showing rather than telling. "Gentle movements. The boat will respond better if you don't rush it. Think of it like making friends. You can't force it." Rosie's face screwed up in concentration as she followed his instructions. Her tongue poked slightly out of the corner of her mouth, a habit she'd had since learning to tie her shoes. The dinghy moved slowly through the harbor at idle speed, making wide, careful turns under her guidance. The wake behind them formed perfect rippling patterns, spreading out towards the shore. "Look, Mom," she called out, beaming with pride as she completed a turn without help. Her smile was wide enough to show the gap where she'd lost a tooth last week. "I'm driving a boat! A real boat!" You sure are, sweetie, Elena called back, sharing a grateful look with Gabe. These moments of normal childhood joy felt precious amid the week's chaos. She snapped a mental picture of Rosie's delighted expression, storing it away like treasure against darker days. When they returned to the dock, Rosie skipped ahead to watch a weathered fisherman mending nets with gnarled, experienced hands, leaving Elena and Gabe sitting on a wooden bench overlooking the water. The bench had faded to a silvery grey from years of sun and salt spray. There's something you should know, Gabe said quietly, his eyes on the horizon where the water met sky in a hazy blue line. I have cardiomyopathy. Usually it's managed well with medication, but stress can trigger rhythm problems. My cardiologist has been concerned about recent events. He traced an absent pattern on the bench with his fingertip. Elena turned to study his face, noting the shadows under his eyes that she'd attributed to general fatigue, the slight pallor beneath his tan. That's why you were struggling last night during the walk. I noticed you seemed winded. He nodded, his gaze still fixed on the distance. The medication usually keeps things stable, but with the media circus and all the attention... He trailed off, shrugging slightly, his broad shoulders rising and falling beneath his navy sweater. Thank you for telling me, Elena said simply. No pity in her voice, just calm acceptance, the same tone she'd used with patients during her EMT days. We should set some boundaries to protect both our health. No surprise press encounters, early nights when possible, and maybe we should have some quiet signals between us. Agreed. Gab seemed to relax slightly at her practical response, tension visibly leaving his neck and shoulders. And maybe a code word, if either of us needs to exit a situation quickly, something that wouldn't raise eyebrows but would let us know. Harbor, Elena suggested, glancing toward the protective curve of the bay with its sturdy stone breakwater. It's neutral enough to use in conversation, but meaningful to us. A safe place. Perfect. He smiled, the expression warming his tired eyes. Simple but effective. I like solutions like that. They spotted Pastor Mara walking along the dock, her familiar figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Her grey cardigan billowed slightly in the breeze as she approached, prayer beads wrapped around her wrist catching the golden light. She joined them with a warm smile, as if finding them there was the most natural thing in the world. Beautiful evening for reflection, she said, settling beside them on the bench that creaked softly under the additional weight. The water always reminds me how small our troubles are in the grand scheme. Mind if we share a moment of prayer? They joined hands simply, without fanfare. Elena's hand felt small in Gabe's larger one, warm and steady. The pastor's voice carried softly over the water. Lord, grant peace to these hearts that serve. Guide their path through troubled waters. Let love be their anchor and truth their compass. May they find strength in stillness and courage in kindness. Amen. Amen, they echoed, the word carrying away on the evening breeze, mingling with the cry of returning gulls. Later that night, after Rosie was asleep with her favourite stuffed penguin clutched to her chest, Elena sat at the guest-house kitchen table with a notebook. The lamp cast a warm circle of light in the otherwise dim room. At the top of a fresh page, she wrote in careful letters, "What love does." Her pen moved steadily across the page, each line a meditation, keeps promises, even small ones, feeds people, body and soul, tells the truth, gently but clearly, protects hearts, especially broken ones, shows up without being asked, stays steady during storms, makes room at crowded tables, builds bridges, not walls, guards peace like a treasure chooses kindness. When it's hardest, she studied the list, adding small details as memories surfaced. The way Gabe adjusted his pace to match Rosie's shorter steps without drawing attention to it. How Pastor Mara created calm with her presence like a stone in rushing water, Mr. Alvarez's quiet protection of their dignity when nosy customers lingered too long at the store. Wednesday morning brought crisp autumn air and new activity in town. Maple leaves swirled across the sidewalks in bright red spirals, and chimney smoke rose from several houses. The community bulletin board outside the general store displayed a fresh notice, the paper still uncreased and bright. Saturday Church Hall fundraiser. Join us for soup and song. All welcome, 5 to 8 p.m. Before the morning was half over, while Rosie practiced braiding Elena's hair at the kitchen table, Pastor Mara called. "We could use some help with the setup," she said warmly, her voice crackling slightly through the connection. "No pressure, but if you're willing, we need someone with a good eye for making tables look inviting." Elena looked at Gabe, who sat reading by the window, sunlight illuminating half his face. He nodded without hesitation, putting a finger in his book to mark his place. "We'll be there," she answered, feeling something like excitement flutter in her chest. "What do you need? Just tell us and we'll handle it." Their simple yes felt like another small victory, choosing engagement over retreat, community over isolation. Another item for her list, perhaps. What love does is say yes to good things, even when hiding feels safer. It steps out into the light when shadows seem more comfortable. The late autumn sun poured through the guest house windows as they discussed logistics for Saturday, light dancing across the wooden floor in golden patches. Rosie added her own suggestions, already planning to help arrange flowers on the tables and fold napkins into fancy shapes she'd learned from a library book. Their quiet afternoon stretched ahead, filled with simple tasks and shared purpose rather than worry about tomorrow's headlines or what might be waiting around the next corner. Wednesday morning brought familiar scents of yeast and sugar as Elena tied her apron at Harbour Point Bakery. Susan, her boss, pulled her aside with motherly concern etched on her face. "How are you holding up, dear? With everything?" Susan's eyes were kind behind her flour-dusted glasses. "I'm managing," Elena replied, adjusting her hairnet. "But I might need shorter shifts until after the biopsy next week." "Of course." Susan squeezed her hand. "Whatever you need. The morning rush is our priority anyway." During her break, Elena counted out some of her last tip money and bought a stack of prepaid coffee cards. She slipped them one by one into the ceramic tip jar, adding a small sign, "For anyone who needs warmth today." The simple act felt right, passing kindness forward even when her own future felt uncertain. Across town, Gabe sat with Pastor Mara in her small office, surrounded by fundraiser plans for Saturday's Veterans Housing Project event. "The quilting circles have been working around the clock," Pastor Mara said, showing him a nearly finished quilt square. Each patch bore careful stitching, a veteran's name, and a blessing worked in colored thread. "Beautiful work." Gabe traced the letters with gentle fingers. "This makes it personal, real. That's exactly what we hoped for." Pastor Mara smiled. "These aren't just housing units, they're homes for people we know and love." Throughout Wednesday afternoon, the church hall hummed with activity as women gathered to complete the quilts. Their needles flashed in the sunlight streaming through stained glass, their quiet conversations a gentle counterpoint to the week's harsh headlines. Thursday morning found Rosie at the kitchen table, surrounded by card stock and markers. Her tongue stuck out slightly as she concentrated on writing place cards for Saturday's dinner. "How do you spell welcome?" she asked, looking up at Elena. "Welcome," Elena spelled out, smiling at her daughter's careful printing. "Those look beautiful, sweetie." Gabe's phone buzzed repeatedly as his PR team sent drafts of his remarks for Saturday. Each version he returned with the same note. "Focus on the veterans. This isn't about me." Mid-afternoon, Colin's number flashed on his screen. Gabe stepped onto the porch to take the call. "The board is nervous about Saturday." Colin's voice crackled with tension. "Cancel the appearance. Send a check instead." "No." Gabe's response was quiet but firm. These veterans deserve more than a distant donation. They deserve to be seen, to be welcomed home. "This isn't good optics, Gabe. The timing—" "Goodbye, Colin." Gabe ended the call, his heart monitor beeping a gentle warning. He took several deep breaths, letting the sea air calm his pulse. Friday afternoon, Elena and Pastor Mara sat in the church office, clicking through slides for Saturday's presentation. Images of veterans receiving keys in other towns filled the screen, faces bright with hope and relief. "This one." Elena pointed to a photo of an elderly veteran hugging his granddaughter on a new front porch. "It shows exactly what we're working for." Mr. Alvarez knocked on the office door, offering to help with ushering for Saturday. His weathered face creased with concern as he pulled out a thumb drive. "My porch camera caught some strange cars in the alley behind the bakery," he said. "3 times this week. Same vehicle, different plates. I saved the footage just in case." Elena thanked him, tucking the drive into her purse. Another piece of kindness. Neighbors watching out for neighbors. Saturday dawned clear and cold. By mid-morning, cinnamon and coffee scented the church hall as volunteers prepared for the evening. Elena worked alongside Susan, who had closed the bakery early to help, arranging pastries on tiered plates. Rosie and 2 Sunday school friends carefully placed her handmade cards at each place setting. Gabe moved between tables, checking sound equipment and greeting early arriving volunteers. The quilts hung along the walls, each square catching light from the setting sun through the windows. Names and blessings created a tapestry of community and care. Mr. Alvarez stood at his post by the door, dignity in every line of his military straight posture. Other veterans began arriving, some in wheelchairs, others walking tall, all welcomed with handshakes and hugs. By 6 o'clock, the hall hummed with voices and warmth. Every chair was filled, every place setting complete, with Rosie's careful welcome cards. The aroma of coffee and cinnamon rolls wrapped around conversations like a comfortable blanket, creating exactly the feeling of home they'd hoped to achieve. Elena looked around the room, taking in the scene. Rosie sat between 2 elderly veterans, showing them her snow globe. Gabe spoke quietly with a young Marine about technology training programs. Pastor Mara moved through the crowd, touching shoulders, offering smiles, creating connections. This was what love looked like in action, not grand gestures or headlines, but simple moments of people caring for people. The room felt like an answer to prayer, though Elena wasn't quite sure which prayer, maybe all of them at once. The soft strumming of acoustic guitar filled the church hall as the fundraiser began. Rich aromas of seafood chowder wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the lingering sweetness of cinnamon rolls. The savory scent of freshly baked bread and herbs added another layer to the comforting atmosphere. People settled into their chairs, veterans proudly wearing their service caps, their medals gleaming under the soft lights, families gathering close, children whispering excitedly as they nestled between parents and grandparents. The hall itself had been transformed with simple decorations, hand-drawn signs from the local elementary school, photographs of veterans through the decades, and twinkling string lights that cast a warm glow over the wooden floors and walls. American flags stood proudly at attention near the podium, their stars and stripes a silent reminder of sacrifice and service. Elena stepped up to the microphone, her hands steady despite her nerves. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but her eyes shone with conviction. The fabric swished softly around her knees as she adjusted the microphone, a strand of hair falling across her cheek before she tucked it behind her ear. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice clear and warm. "Tonight isn't about buildings or numbers. It's about dignity. It's about saying thank you in a way that matters." She paused, looking at the faces before her. Weathered faces of veterans, tired faces of young families, curious faces of children. Every person deserves a safe harbor, a place to call home. Our veterans gave us safety. Now it's our turn to give it back. This isn't charity. It's community taking care of its own. The room grew quiet, heads nodding in agreement. Mr. Alvarez wiped his eyes with a handkerchief, his wife's hand tight in his. The couple had been married for 53 years, and his Navy service had been the foundation of their life together. In the corner, 3 elderly men in Vietnam veteran caps sat shoulder to shoulder, their silence speaking volumes as they exchanged glances full of unspoken memories and understanding. A young mother bounced a baby on her hip, her husband's deployment photo pinned to her jacket like a badge of honor. When Gabe took the podium, he left his prepared notes folded in his pocket. He stood tall, scanning the room with clear eyes, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. The subtle gray at his temples caught the light as he leaned toward the microphone. "We've been calling this the Harbor Point Veterans Housing Initiative," he said, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "But tonight, I'd like to announce its true name." He gestured to where Rosie sat with her snow globe, her small hands wrapped protectively around the glass dome. "We're calling it Rosie Keys." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of surprise and emotion. Rosie's eyes went wide with surprise, her mouth forming a perfect O as she looked from her mother to Gabe and back again. "Because it's not just about the veterans," Gabe continued, his voice growing stronger, more passionate than he'd allowed himself to be in public for years. "It's about their children and grandchildren. It's about the courage small hands carry when they shake a snow globe for bravery, or write welcome cards for strangers, or trust that tomorrow will be better than today. It's about how the smallest among us often teach us the biggest lessons about hope." Veterans throughout the room began standing, their caps held over their hearts, the movement spreading like a gentle wave. Some helped others to their feet, wheelchairs pushed back, canes gripped tight. An elderly woman with oxygen tubes clasped her hands together in prayer. A teenage boy helped his grandfather rise, supporting his elbow with gentle reverence. "Rosie Keys will provide more than housing," Gabe said, the overhead lights reflecting in his eyes. "It will provide roots, community, and the dignity every family deserves. Because courage, like love, grows best when it has somewhere to call home. And because a little girl taught me that home isn't just about having a roof, it's about having people who believe in you." The applause started softly, then swelled until it filled, every corner of the hall, bouncing off the rafters and wrapping around them all like an embrace. Rosie clutched her snow globe, tears streaming down her face as she smiled, the glitter inside swirling with her trembling hands. Elena reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing it tight, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Pastor Mara started the slideshow, images of hope and homecoming flowing across the screen. Each photo told a story, keys being handed over, families embracing, American flags raised on new porches, children playing in yards where hope had been planted alongside flowers. The guitar player softly underscored the moments with "America the Beautiful," the gentle picking of strings weaving between the images like a thread of gold. When the presentation ended, Elena and Gabe stepped behind the curtain that sectioned off the makeshift stage area. In the dim light, their eyes met. The week's tension, fear, and unexpected grace seemed to crystallize in that moment. The air between them felt charged, alive with possibility and something neither had dared name yet. Without planning or thought, they moved together. Their first kiss was gentle, honest, unguarded, not for show or cameras or obligation, but simply because their hearts had found their way there naturally. Elena felt the warmth of his hands as they cradled her face, and Gabe felt the softness of her lips against his, a moment of perfect rightness in a world that had felt off-kilter for so long. Pastor Mara, coming to check on the next part of the program, stopped in the doorway. Her smile was knowing and kind as she watched them part, both slightly embarrassed at being caught, like teenagers rather than adults with decades of life experience between them. Elena's cheeks flushed pink, and Gabe cleared his throat, though neither moved away from the other. "Good fruit," she said softly, nodding with satisfaction. "When we plant seeds of kindness, we never know exactly what will grow. Sometimes it's exactly what the garden needed all along." She tapped her watch gently. "Dessert in 5 minutes, if you two can manage to join us again." The evening continued with dessert and coffee, veterans sharing stories, children running between tables, laughter punctuating serious conversations about service and sacrifice. By 9:45, the donation total flashed on the screen, well above their goal. The numbers continued to climb as people slipped additional checks into the donation box by the door. Someone started singing "God Bless America," others joining in until the old walls seemed to vibrate with hope, the harmonies building with each verse. As the crowd began to thin, Mr. Alvarez approached them, his cane tapping softly on the wooden floor. "Take the back alley home," he advised quietly, his weathered hand resting on Gabe's shoulder. "Saw 2 news vans circling earlier. Like sharks, those reporters. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction." They slipped out through the kitchen, thanking the volunteers who were elbow-deep in dishwater, Rosie between them, her small hand in each of theirs forming a human chain. The night air was cool and sweet with early autumn, the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke wrapping around them. Their footsteps echoed off brick walls as they hurried down the narrow alley, trying to be quiet, but breaking into soft laughter when Rosie's snow globe tinkled in her pocket. "Did you see Mr. Peterson's face when they announced the name?" Elena whispered, ducking under a low-hanging branch, its leaves rustling against her hair. "I thought he might burst with pride." "Did you see Rosie's?" Gabe whispered back, his hand finding Elena's in the darkness, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I've never seen someone look so shocked and happy at the same time." They made it home without being spotted, the guest house warm and welcoming after the evening's events. Rosie fell asleep almost immediately, still clutching her snow globe, its miniature world still and peaceful under the glass dome. Elena tucked the blankets around her daughter, brushing a kiss against her forehead before quietly closing the bedroom door. The next morning dawned clear and peaceful, sunlight streaming through the curtains and painting golden patterns across the wooden floors. Birds chirped outside, and somewhere in the distance a lawnmower hummed. It should have been a perfect morning, a continuation of last night's triumph. Elena's phone buzzed at 6:40, the screen lighting up with a new headline that made her stomach clench into a tight, cold knot. This one was uglier than before, meaner, designed to wound rather than merely scandalize. The words seemed to burn into her vision, poisoning the golden morning light. Elena's hand shook as she stared at her phone screen. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Exposed! Cancer bride's pre-diagnosis, plot to trap billionaire." Below it was what looked like an email, dated 3 weeks before her fainting spell at the bakery. The words blurred as she read them. "Need to convince him I'm sick. Easy mark. Always had a soft spot for saving people." "This is impossible," she whispered, her coffee growing cold beside her. "I never wrote this." Gabe appeared in the doorway, his own phone in hand. "I've seen it. My team's already tracking the source." The morning sun was just beginning to warm the kitchen when Elena's phone rang. It was Sarah from the bakery, her voice tight with worry. "Elena, there's been a fire. The crates behind the shop. Someone set them burning. Fire department's got it out, but—" Sarah's voice cracked. "They're saying it wasn't an accident." Elena's legs felt weak. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, thank God. Chief Martinez says they found traces of something chemical, like someone wanted to send a message." Gabe drove them to the bakery, taking the long way to avoid the news vans that had started gathering. The alley's brick walls were streaked with smoke, charred crates still dripping from the fire hoses. The air smelled sharp and wrong. Chief Martinez met them, his notebook open. "Found accelerant residue. Professional job. They knew what they were doing." As they talked with the chief, Elena's phone buzzed again. The same gossip blogger who'd covered the fundraiser had posted new photos, grainy shots through the alley's shadows taken before Saturday's event. The captions twisted everything: secret meetings and plotting their next move. "Those must be from when we were checking the back route to the church," Elena said, her voice hollow. "They're making it look like conspiracy." Gabe finished, his face pale. He pressed a hand to his chest, breathing carefully. Elena recognized the gesture. "Let's sit down. Now." They found the guest house steps, morning sun warming the concrete. Gabe's smart watch blinked red, warning of elevated heart rhythm. Elena took his hand, squeezing gently. "Slow breaths," she said. "Remember what Dr. Chen taught you. In for 4, hold for 4. They breathed together, watching the numbers on his watch gradually decline. A cardinal landed nearby, bright against the autumn leaves, singing its morning song as if nothing was wrong. "Better?" Elena asked after a few minutes. Gabe nodded. "The cardiomyopathy, it doesn't like stress. Then we make a plan. Something solid and calm." Elena stood, offering her hand. "First step, police report. That email is forged, and someone tried to burn down my workplace. We need it documented." Inside, they found Rosie still asleep, her snow globe casting tiny rainbows on the ceiling. Elena called Pastor Mara to arrange childcare. They needed to handle this without worrying their daughter. At the police station, Detective Morris took their statement, his eyes sharp as he studied the forged email. This level of digital manipulation, plus arson. Someone's invested time and money in hurting you. Any ideas who? They listed possibilities. Disappointed investors, tabloid writers looking for a story, even Collins' concerns about the New York deal. The detective made notes, promising to coordinate with the fire investigator. "We'll say nothing publicly," Gabe decided as they left. "No statements, no responses. Let the facts speak." Elena agreed. Truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. They spent Sunday quietly, trying to maintain normalcy for Rosie's sake. Elena baked bread, filling the house with warmth and cinnamon. Gabe worked on his laptop, coordinating with his security team. Pastor Mara brought over a casserole and sat with them through dinner, her presence steady and calming. Monday morning dawned grey and cool. Elena was helping Rosie pack her school bag when 2 sharp knocks echoed through the house. The first came from a woman in a crisp suit, her child services badge catching the light. "Mrs. Hart Whitlock, we've received a concerning report about your daughter's welfare." Before Elena could respond, the second knock came. This time it was Dr. Chen's nurse, her face worried. "Mr. Whitlock, the doctor needs to see you immediately. Your last readings." Elena and Gabe looked at each other across the entrance hall, both understanding that this moment would test every promise they'd made. Through the window, they could see Rosie waiting by Pastor Mara's car for her ride to school, small backpack on her shoulders, snow globe safe in her pocket. The cardinal from yesterday landed on the porch railing, still singing its fierce, bright song against the growing shadows. The Child Services representative, Ms. Anderson, settled into their living room with a leather portfolio balanced on her knee. We take all reports seriously, especially those involving children's emotional well-being. Elena sat straight-backed on the couch, hands folded calmly despite her racing heart. Of course, what specifically are your concerns? The report suggests unstable living conditions, possible financial exploitation, and emotional distress. Ms. Anderson's pen hovered over her notepad. Can you walk me through the recent changes in Rosie's home life? Elena explained everything. The medical situation, the marriage arrangement, their move to the guest house. She provided Rosie's latest report card, documentation of her consistent school attendance, and Pastor Mara's phone number. Rosie's routine hasn't changed much, Elena explained. She still goes to the same school, sees the same friends. We've just added more people who care about her. In Gabe's study, Dr. Chen was having a more heated discussion with his patient. Your heart rhythm is dangerously irregular. The stress from this media circus could trigger a serious episode. I'm managing it, Gabe insisted, showing his watch data. The medication's working. The medication works when you rest. Dr. Chen corrected. These spikes are concerning. I strongly recommend a few days of observation in the hospital. Not possible. Gabe's voice was firm. Not with everything happening. His phone buzzed. Colin again. Gabe put it on speaker, jaw tight. The board's meeting tomorrow. Colin's voice crackled through. Step back now, or they'll vote you out. We can't risk the New York deal over this situation. The deal's solid, Gabe replied. The numbers work. Numbers aren't everything. Optics matter. Goodbye, Colin. Gabe ended the call, pressing his fingers to his temples. Dr. Chen frowned at the blood pressure reading on his portable monitor. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your body can't handle this level of stress. In the kitchen, Elena was showing Ms. Anderson Rosie's homework space and the family calendar on the fridge when they heard small feet running down the hall. You can't unmake us family, Rosie burst in, tears streaming down her face. I heard them talking about voting and leaving. Elena caught her daughter in a tight hug. Oh, sweetheart, no one is leaving. Come, here. They sat at the kitchen table, Rosie hiccuping through her tears. Ms. Anderson watched quietly as Elena smoothed Rosie's hair. Remember what we said about promises? Elena asked gently. Real ones don't break just because things get hard. Rosie pulled her snow globe from her pocket, shaking it to watch the glitter swirl. But what if they make you? What if they vote? Then we'll handle it together, Elena assured her. That's what families do. Ms. Anderson made a few notes, her expression softening. I think I've seen enough for today. I'll need to file my report, but I see no immediate concerns about Rosie's care or emotional support. Later that night, after Rosie was finally asleep, Elena heard a thump in the hallway. She found Gabe leaning against the wall, face grey with exhaustion. Just got dizzy for a second, he mumbled as she rushed to steady him. That's it. You're resting. Now. She helped him to the living room couch, grabbing his medication and water. I can't slow down, he protested weakly. Too much at stake. Everything at stake requires you healthy. Elena checked his watch readings, frowning at the numbers. I'm driving you to your checkup tomorrow morning. No arguments. He started to protest, but stopped at her determined expression. You sound like Dr. Chen. Good, at least one of us should. She adjusted a pillow behind his head. Rest, I'll wake you for your evening dose. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Elena bundled Rosie off to school with Pastor Mara, then returned to find Gabe already dressed for his appointment. I can drive myself. He tried one last time. Elena just picked up her keys. You could, but you won't. The morning traffic was light as they headed toward the medical center, leaves skittering across the road in the autumn wind. Elena noticed Gabe's hand pressed against his chest again, but said nothing, just drove a little faster. At the hospital, Dr. Chen studied the latest EKG readout with a frown. Your heart rate's still too high, but we can manage it with adjusted medication if, and I stress if, you minimize stress and get proper rest. Gabe sat on the exam table, his normally pressed shirt wrinkled from the tests. Define proper rest. 8 hours sleep minimum, no intense meetings, limited screen time. Dr. Chen typed notes into his tablet. And absolutely no press conferences or public appearances for at least 2 weeks. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. Dr. Priya Shah's number flashed on the screen. She stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. Mrs. Hart, we have your biopsy results. Dr. Shah's voice was warm. The mass is real, but it's early stage and contained. With surgery and follow-up treatment, the prognosis is very good. Elena's legs went weak. She sank into a nearby chair, tears streaming down her face. It's treatable? Very treatable. We caught it early enough that... A notification cut across the screen. Breaking. Small-town widow changes cancer. Story. Sources say early stage. Now after terminal claims. Elena's stomach lurched. She hadn't even told anyone the results yet. How could they twist this so fast? Back in the exam room, she found Gabe arguing with Dr. Chen about work restrictions. His face softened when he saw her tears. Elena, what's wrong? She showed him both the call log and the article. It's early stage, treatable, but they're already... Her voice cracked. Gabe reached for her hand, but his own heart monitor started beeping faster. Dr. Chen shot him a warning look. Mr. Whitlock, what did we just discuss about stress management? Elena's phone buzzed again. Child Services. Ms. Anderson's voice was apologetic but firm. Given the new allegations, we need to schedule a follow-up home inspection. Tomorrow at 9? Before Elena could answer, Gabe's phone lit up with a call from his PR lawyer, Marcus Webb. They put it on speaker. The board's meeting in an hour. Marcus said, We need to get ahead of this. I recommend temporary separation, just for appearances. A few days apart while we craft the right message. No. Gabe started, but the monitor beeped again. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. Elena squeezed Gabe's hand. He's right. You need rest, and I need to protect Rosie from this circus. She turned to the phone. Marcus, what do you suggest? Stay somewhere neutral, somewhere respected, just for a few days. Pastor Mara's? Elena said quietly. The parsonage has a guest room. Dr. Chen nodded approval. Much better for everyone's health. They drove home in heavy silence. Elena packed quickly, just enough for a few days. Clothes, Rosie's school books, her snow globe. Pastor Mara would pick Rosie up from school and bring her straight to the parsonage. Gabe had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep on the couch, his medication making him drowsy. Elena stood watching him for a moment, noting the new lines of worry on his face, the way his hand still rested protectively over his heart, even in sleep. She leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. I'll fix this, she whispered. I promise. The drive to the parsonage was short, but felt endless. Pastor Mara had the guest room ready with fresh towels and extra blankets. She didn't ask questions, just squeezed Elena's shoulder and said, Sometimes love looks like stepping back to step forward. That night, Elena lay awake listening to Rosie's steady breathing from the twin bed across the room. The parsonage creaked and settled around them, unfamiliar sounds in unfamiliar darkness. When Wednesday morning finally dawned, it brought steel-gray skies and a heavy silence. Elena stood at the parsonage window, watching autumn leaves scatter across the quiet street. No cameras, no reporters, just silence and space to think. But the weight of everything, Gabe's health, the public lies, child services scrutiny, pressed on her chest like lead. She had promised to fix this. She just wasn't sure how. Wednesday morning's quiet at the parsonage was broken by 3 sharp knocks. Elena opened the door to find Mr. Alvarez on the porch, his weathered face creased with concern. He clutched a small black thumb drive in his hand. "Mrs. Hart, you need to see this," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Been watching my security footage from the last week. Found something that might help." Pastor Mara appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Come in, Joe. I just made coffee." They gathered around the parsonage's old desktop computer, mugs steaming beside them. Mr. Alvarez's hands shook slightly as he plugged in the drive. "Watch this clip from Monday night, behind the bakery." The grainy nighttime footage showed a sleek car pulling into the alley. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, checking his phone. Elena leaned closer to the screen. "That's Colin's assistant," she said, "the one who handles his special projects." The video continued. A few minutes later, the freelance blogger who'd been at the soup kitchen arrived, carrying a laptop bag. The 2 men talked, heads close together, passing what looked like papers between them. "Now watch this," Mr. Alvarez said, clicking to another file. "This is from Tuesday morning, before the email story broke." The same blogger approached Elena outside the bakery's back door, holding out what was clearly an envelope. Even in the grainy footage, Elena's body language was clear, backing away, shaking her head, pointing firmly towards the street. "I remember that," Elena said softly. "He wanted to pay me for an exclusive about the marriage. Said he could make it worth my while if I gave him something juicy about Gabe." Pastor Mara's hand found Elena's shoulder. "The timing matches perfectly with when that forged email appeared online." "There's more," Mr. Alvarez said. He pulled up another clip from the night of the small fire. The same fancy car was parked in the shadows, and a figure that matched Colin's build walked quickly away just minutes before the flames appeared. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee. "This proves it wasn't random. They've been trying to destroy us from the start." "We need to make copies," Pastor Mara said decisively. She pulled a fresh thumb drive from her desk drawer. "Multiple copies, stored in different places. Evidence has a way of disappearing when powerful people get nervous." They spent the next hour carefully copying each video file, checking timestamps and image quality. Pastor Mara labeled each copy with precise notes about when and where the footage was captured. Elena called Gabe's lawyer directly, speaking in hushed tones while Rosie did homework at the kitchen table. "We're sending you some security footage. It shows meetings between Colin's team and the blogger who published the forged email, and possibly connects them to the fire." She emailed the files with trembling fingers, double-checking each attachment. "Please tell me this helps." The lawyer's response was cautiously optimistic. "This definitely changes things. Give me 24 hours to analyze and authenticate the footage." That evening, after Rosie was asleep, Elena's phone lit up with Gabe's number. His voice was weak, tired. "The lawyer sent me the videos." "How are you feeling?" she asked, noting the strain in his words. "Blood pressure's stable. Heart rate's better with the new medication." He paused, breathing audibly. "But Elena, I'm so tired of this. Colin's been my COO for 8 years. I trusted him with everything. This isn't your fault," she said firmly. "Some people see kindness as weakness. They think everything has to have an angle. I should have seen it coming. The way he pushed back against every charitable project, always talking about optics and market perception." Gabe's voice cracked slightly. "I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool," Elena said. "You're a good man who believes in doing good things. That's why I trusted you with Rosie's future. That's why I still trust you now." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of their breathing. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. Elena straightened her spine, though he couldn't see her. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the town council's open session. They need to hear the truth from me, directly. No PR spin, no careful statements, just honest words from a neighbor they've known for years. Elena, please be careful. Colin has—" "I'm done being careful," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done letting them twist our story. I'm going to stand up in my bakery uniform, with flour probably still on my shoes, and tell the truth. All of it." After they hung up, Elena laid out her work clothes for morning. The simple black pants, white button-down shirt, and navy apron with the Harbour Point Bakery logo. She tucked Mr. Alvarez's thumb drive carefully in the apron pocket, checking twice to make sure the zipper was secure. She couldn't sleep, so she sat by the parsonage window, watching the streetlights make patterns on the sidewalk. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. She thought about Gabe, alone in their guest house, his heart monitor beeping steadily beside him. About Rosie, sleeping peacefully across the room, clutching her lighthouse snow globe. About all the veterans who'd stood in their caps at the fundraiser, believing in something good. When Thursday morning arrived, Elena dressed slowly and deliberately, each button a small act of determination. She braided her hair neatly, tied her apron strings with steady hands. Pastor Mara appeared with toast and coffee, but Elena could only manage a few sips. "You don't have to do this alone," Pastor Mara said softly. Elena touched the thumb drive in her pocket. "Yes, I do. They tried to make us look like liars. The truth needs to come from me." She hugged Rosie extra tight before school, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Be brave today, sweetheart. Remember what I told you about doing the right thing." Rosie nodded against her shoulder. "Even when it's hard, even when you're scared." "That's right." Elena straightened Rosie's collar. "I love you so much." The walk to town hall felt both endless and too short. Elena's work shoes clicked against the sidewalk, each step bringing her closer to the moment that would change everything. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. She paused at the bottom of the town hall steps, touching the thumb drive one last time through her apron pocket. Inside that building, the monthly open session would start in 10 minutes. Time to let the truth speak for itself. The wooden doors of the church hall creaked open at 8 o'clock sharp. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting coloured patterns across the worn floorboards. The usual Thursday morning council meeting had drawn an unusual crowd. Local reporters lined the back wall, their cameras ready, while familiar faces from town filled the wooden pews. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she approached the podium. The microphone hummed to life, and she smoothed her bakery apron, drawing comfort from its familiar feel. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My name is Elena Hart. Most of you know me from the bakery, where I've made your morning cinnamon rolls for the past 5 years. Today, I need to tell you the whole truth about what's been happening." She took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces she'd known for years. Mrs. Peterson from the flower shop, Mr. Chen who ran the hardware store, dozens of others who'd watched Rosie grow up. 3 weeks ago I fainted at work. The initial scan showed what looked like advanced cancer. Her voice caught slightly. I was terrified, not for myself, but for my daughter Rosie. As a widow with no family, I couldn't bear thinking of her alone in the system. The room was absolutely silent now, every eye fixed on her. That's when I reached out to Gabe Whitlock. Not because he was wealthy, but because years ago, when I was a teenage EMT volunteer, I pulled him from a rip current. I thought maybe he'd remember that day and help protect my daughter. She explained the marriage arrangement, her voice growing stronger. It was always meant to be legal and transparent. We drew up proper papers. We made clear plans. And then something unexpected happened. We started to care about each other, to build something real. Elena reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the thumb drive. But someone didn't want that to happen. Someone decided to destroy what we were building with lies and forgeries. She plugged the drive into the laptop, connected to the projector. The first video clip flickered to life on the wall, grainy security footage from Mr. Alvarez's porch camera. The timestamp showed last week, late at night. A man in a dark suit met the gossip blogger behind the bakery, passing thick envelopes back and forth. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people recognized Colin's fixer, the same man who'd been quoted extensively in the smear articles. The next clip showed Elena herself refusing an envelope from the blogger. "I won't lie about my family," her recorded voice said firmly. From her seat near the front, Rosie suddenly stood up. Pastor Mara reached for her, but the little girl shook her head. "Mr. Gabe is my safe harbor," she announced clearly, her voice ringing through the hall. "He helps me with math and reads me stories and makes sure I'm not scared at night. That's the truth." The veterans who'd been at the fundraiser, at least 20 of them, rose from their seats, caps held respectfully against their chests. Mr. Alvarez nodded firmly from his place among them. The back doors opened quietly, and Gabe entered. He was pale, leaning slightly on the doorframe, but his eyes were clear and determined. Elena's heart jumped at the sight of him. He should have been resting, but of course he'd come. The council chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitlock, would you like to address the meeting?" "No need," Gabe said quietly, making his way down the aisle. "Elena speaks for both of us. I just came to stand with my family." Colin burst through the side door, his face red. "This is ridiculous. The board won't—" "The board has already voted," Gabe interrupted calmly. "This morning, actually. They reviewed the security footage last night. You're fired, Colin. The police want to talk to you about that suspicious fire, by the way." Colin looked wildly around the room, but found no sympathy in the sea of faces. He backed away, then turned and fled, accompanied by a chorus of boos and angry mutters. The council chairman raised his hands for quiet. "I believe we have a vote before us. The final approval for the Rosie Keys Veterans Housing Project." He looked around at his fellow council members. All in favor. Every hand went up. The hall erupted in applause and cheers. Gabe made his way to Elena's side, taking her hand in his. "We're finally free," he whispered, his eyes bright with unshed tears. The chairman had to bang his gavel several times to be heard over the celebration. Elena felt Rosie's small arms wrap around her waist, felt Gabe's steady presence beside her. Through the stained glass windows, morning sunlight painted them in shades of gold and blue, like a blessing made visible. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and calling out support. Veterans shook hands with council members, reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, and Pastor Mara's eyes shone with joyful tears as she watched her community come together in truth and love. 2 weeks passed like a gentle tide, each day bringing small victories and quiet healing. The morning of Elena's surgery dawned clear and cool. Gabe held her hand in pre-op, while Rosie clutched her snow globe in the waiting room with Pastor Mara. "You've got this," he whispered, squeezing her fingers before they wheeled her away. 3 hours later, the surgeon emerged with a broad smile. Complete success. The mass was contained, just as we hoped. No spread, no complications. Relief washed over them all like a summer wave. Elena recovered steadily, her natural color returning day by day. She insisted on walking the hospital corridors as soon as she was allowed, Gabe matching her careful pace. He had his own healing to do. The new cardiac medication made him tired at first, but the local rehab center worked with him to build strength safely. Elena often sat with him during his sessions, working on the bakery's reopening plans while he did his prescribed exercises. Slow and steady, his cardiologist reminded them both. That's how we rebuild. The media storm calmed as truth replaced sensation. Major outlets printed retractions, their earlier accusations dissolving like morning mist. The gossip blogger, faced with potential legal consequences, wrote a full statement naming Colin's fixer and detailing the attempted bribery scheme. I should have remembered that truth matters more than clicks, the blogger concluded. I'm sorry for the harm I caused this family. Meanwhile, the Rosie Keys Veterans Housing Complex took shape on the edge of town. What began as a construction site transformed into a community effort. Volunteers showed up with paintbrushes and ladders, turning plain fences into cheerful boundaries. The church quilting circle worked overtime, creating unique curtains for each unit. Every stitch carries a blessing, Pastor Mara told them, as nimble fingers worked fabric into welcome. Elena's return to the bakery was gradual but joyful. She started with just mornings, kneading dough and training new staff as her strength returned. The community had rallied during her absence. Local businesses pooled resources to donate new ovens and equipment. The old ones were getting tired anyway, her boss said with a wink. Time for fresh starts all around. Rosie took particular pride in decorating the shop window. She positioned her beloved snow globe carefully among fresh cinnamon rolls and muffins, next to a hand-lettered sign she'd made herself. Hope baked fresh daily. Do you think people will understand? She asked Elena seriously. I think they'll feel it. Elena answered, hugging her daughter close. Sometimes that's even better. Gabe found his own rhythm in these gentler days. He spent afternoons at the Rosie Keys complex, helping veterans navigate lease paperwork and listening to their stories. Each signature represented another life finding solid ground. This isn't charity, he explained to one former sergeant who seemed hesitant. It's investment in community. Your presence here makes us all stronger. The evening light was turning golden when they gathered on the guest house porch. Elena, Gabe, Rosie, Pastor Mara, and Mr. Alvarez. Steam rose from bowls of fresh fish, chowder, made from Mr. Alvarez's secret recipe. My mother's recipe, actually, he admitted, passing warm bread. She always said good food makes family out of neighbors. Rosie had set the table with care, adding wildflowers in mason jars between the bowls. The harbor breeze carried the scent of salt and autumn leaves. Remember when we first met here? Pastor Mara asked, stirring her chowder. Such different people then. Elena smiled, thinking of those first uncertain days. Different maybe, but the important parts were already there, just waiting to grow. Like bread dough, Rosie added seriously. It looks small at first, but it rises when you give it time. Gabe reached for Elena's hand under the table, his touch warm and familiar now. His heart monitor showed steady green, calm, stable, strong. To rising, Mr. Alvarez proposed, lifting his water glass in a toast. To rising, they echoed, voices blending with the evening birds and distant waves. The sunset painted everything in shades of peace, the harbor, the new housing complex, the bakery windows, and their gathered faces. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the moment, while harbor bells chimed softly in the distance. Pastor Mara watched them all with quiet joy, remembering prayers answered and bridges built. Mr. Alvarez shared stories of his mother's kitchen, making them laugh. Rosie leaned against Elena's shoulder, content and secure. Here was the truth no headline could capture, the simple power of people choosing kindness, choosing community, choosing to stand together. Here was love, served in a bowl of chowder, stitched into curtains, baked into daily bread. The October morning dawned clear and crisp, painting Harbour Point in shades of pearl and rose. Townspeople gathered by the lighthouse while the sun was still a promise on the horizon, their breath visible in the cool air. The newly completed Rosy Quays complex stood proudly behind them, its fresh paint gleaming. Veterans in pressed uniforms stood in a line near the ribbon, some leaning on canes, others standing at parade rest from decades of habit. Each wore a small lighthouse pin on their lapel, crafted by the local high school's art club. Children from Rosie's class held golden keys on quilted ribbons, each one stitched with care by the church sewing circle. The ribbons bore messages of welcome and hope, sewn in bright threads against soft fabric. Pastor Mara had blessed each key the night before, praying over them in the quiet church. Elena stood near the podium, her health restored and her eyes bright. The surgery had been successful, and her regular checkups now brought only good news. She wore a simple blue dress that caught the morning light, her hand resting gently on Rosie's shoulder. Mr. Alvarez stepped forward first, his camera carefully documenting everything as usual. "For the record," he said with a wink, though everyone knew he meant for the heart. Gabe approached the microphone as the sky began to lighten. His new medication had found the right balance, and his color was good. The cardiac rehab team stood proudly among the crowd. They'd helped him build back his strength step by step. "Harbour Point," he began, his voice steady and warm. "This isn't just about buildings or keys. This is about coming home." He paused, looking out at the gathered faces. "When I was young, this town saved my life. Elena pulled me from these waters. Now, together, we get to help others find safe harbor." The first rays of sunrise touched the lighthouse just then, as if on cue. A collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. One by one, children stepped forward to present keys to veterans. Each exchange was photographed, each smile genuine. Mr. Martinez, a former Marine, knelt carefully to accept his key from a small girl in pigtails. "Thank you, little sister," he said softly, and more than a few eyes grew damp. The quilted ribbons fluttered in the morning breeze as keys changed hands. Each veteran received not just a key, but a welcome package: basic supplies, local gift cards, and handwritten notes from townspeople. When the last key had been given, Pastor Mara stepped forward. "There's one more blessing to share," she announced, gesturing toward the pier. Elena and Gabe moved to the weathered boards where they'd first reconnected months ago. Rosie stood between them, holding her beloved snow globe. The town gathered close, forming a protective circle of community. "When we first married," Elena said clearly, "it was for safety and promise. Today we choose each other again, for love, for family, for joy." Gabe's eyes never left Elena's face as he spoke. "In sickness and health, in storm and calm, I choose you. I choose us, this harbor we've built together." The morning light caught Elena's smile as she answered, "In darkness and dawn, in fear and faith, I choose you. I choose our family, this love we've grown together." Pastor Mara's words were simple and true. What began in kindness has bloomed into love. What started as shelter has become home. Rosie looked up at both her parents, then shook her snow globe with conviction. Tiny flakes swirled inside the glass dome, catching the sunrise. "It's snowing good luck," she declared, her voice carrying across the quiet harbor. The lighthouse bell began to toll, deep and clear. A flock of gulls rose from their perches, wings flashing silver against the morning sky. Sunlight struck the water like scattered gold, making the harbor gleam. Gabe drew Elena close, his heart monitor showing the steady green of peace. "Home," he whispered against her hair. Elena's answer was soft but certain. "Harbor. Their safe word had transformed from a signal of retreat into a blessing, a promise, a declaration of trust. The gathered crowd burst into applause and cheers. Veterans stood a little straighter, children bounced with excitement, and neighbors wiped happy tears. Mr. Alvarez's camera clicked rapidly, capturing joy in every frame. The waves lapped gently at the pier posts, providing rhythm to the moment. Laughter rose like music, from the veterans admiring their new keys, from the children proudly showing off their empty ribbon holders, from Elena and Gabe and Rosie standing close together in the morning light. Here was the proof that love, chosen in faith and tended with care, could heal what seemed broken. Here was the evidence that community, built on trust and strengthened by trial, could shelter everyone. Here was the truth that second chances, given in grace, could blossom into something beautiful. The harbor bells continued their melody, mixing with the sound of waves and celebration. Morning had fully arrived, bringing with it all the promise of new beginnings and all the security of coming home.